The dosing line was already feeding when I came onto the gallery, and I knew from the rail readout it was feeding wrong. Not malfunctioning. Wrong in the way a thing is wrong when the universe has handed you a result you did not order. The amber column that tracks compound saturation in a subject's blood had climbed to the band we mark in red and labeled terminal, and the subject, the human on the table below me behind the glass, had just turned his head and asked Orsel, my second, whether the procedure took much longer, because he had not eaten since the transit and would like to. I want to be precise about the order of things, because the order is the part that should frighten you, and the part everyone forgets first. He asked about the meal before the readout finished climbing, before the alarm. He asked the way a man asks at a clinic when the wait is run long and he is being polite about it. Orsel did not answer him. Orsel was looking at the rail, at the amber column standing in the red band, and Orsel's throat frill had gone the flat gray we go when we are afraid and are too disciplined to say so. I am Vedic Halran. For 61 cycles I kept the compound archive on Reskil Deep, the largest catalog of lethal agents this arm of the galaxy has assembled. 11,000 entries, every poison, venom, sedative, corrosive, and neural agent any member species has ever distilled, weaponized, or stumbled into. My work was not killing. My work was knowing. I held the numbers that told the fleet how much of a thing would stop a heart, and how little. I was good at it. I was, before that cycle, certain that there was no living tissue in the catalogued worlds whose response to a poison I could not predict to 3 decimal places. I am telling you about the cycle that ended that certainty, because the council asked me to put it on record before I am too old to put it anywhere, and because the young toxicologists they keep sending me still arrive believing the archive is a complete document. It is not. It has a margin now. The margin is shaped like a man who wanted his lunch. Let me go back to the table. We had the human because of a treaty clause, not a capture. That distinction mattered later, and I will keep it honest. After the 7 border actions, the cessation terms included a research exchange annex. Bodies for study on both sides, volunteered, compensated, returned. The Sevan sent us cell cultures. Earth, when its turn came, sent us a man, a living one, standing in our receiving bay with a duffel over one shoulder and a translation collar he did not need, because he had learned enough of the trade tongue on the transit to make himself understood, which none of us expected and which I should have read as the first warning. His name was Doran Webb. He gave it the way a man gives a name he has had a long time and is comfortable inside. Middle years for a human, I was later told, the band where their bodies are past the careless strength of the young and have not yet begun the long surrender of the old. Broad through the shoulders, going soft at the middle the way their settled males do. Gray coming into a dark beard. He had been, before the annex, something they called a brewer, a maker of fermented drink. And before that something to do with what they called industrial solvents, and he found it funny in a dry, private way that those 2 careers had qualified him for this one. I did not understand the joke then. I understand it completely now. The protocol for a volunteered subject is not the protocol for an execution. I want that clear. We were not trying to kill Doran Webb. We were measuring response curves, the rate and degree to which a controlled, sublethal dose of a catalogued agent perturbed a human system, so that the archive could finally close the largest blank cell in its 11,000 entries. The column marked human, which until that annex had held nothing but the word pending and a footnote that read insufficient data, do not extrapolate. We had reasons to be careful and reasons to be cavalier, and we chose cavalier, and that is on me. The careful reason was that we knew almost nothing. The cavalier reason was that we were toxicologists of the catalogued worlds, and in every prior case, every 7, every mock, every Orophant, every hard-shelled deep worlder whose blood ran on metals instead of salts. First dose, the calibration dose, the gentle one, had produced exactly the textbook perturbation. A flutter in the pulse, a dilation, a measurable dip in coordination. We had never in 61 cycles given a calibration dose to a vertebrate of any world and gotten nothing. So we did not plan for nothing. We planned for a flutter, and we set the alarm bands accordingly, and we strapped Mr. Webb to the table loosely, more for the steadiness of the cannula than for restraint, and Orsel asked him, through the collar he did not need, to tell us if he felt unwell. I'll holler, Webb said. We began with entry 4471. I chose it deliberately. It is not exotic. It is a refined plant alkaloid the mock used to put down their largest draft animals, a clean cardiac sedative, fast, predictable, with a perturbation curve so reliable we teach it to first cycle students as the reference standard. A dose calibrated for a mock of Webb's mass, halved for safety, would produce in any catalogued vertebrate a pronounced bradycardia inside 90 seconds. The heart slowing visibly, the subject growing drowsy, no danger at that fraction, full recovery in an hour. It is the gentlest true thing in the archive. I gave it to him because I wanted the first data point to be one I could trust. The cannula fed, the rail track saturation. We watched the cardiac line. The cardiac line did nothing. I do not mean it did something small. Orsel beside me was the first to lean in because the young lean in. He said the dose hadn't taken a line blockage, a bad cannula seat. We checked. The saturation column said the compound was in him. The level was climbing exactly as the model predicted. Entry 4471 was in Doran Webb's blood at the concentration that drops a draft beast in under 2 minutes. And his heart kept its rhythm the way a clock keeps its rhythm. Unhurried, indifferent, 60-some beats to the minute, not one of them slowed. Confirm the agent, I said. Orsel confirmed it. Right vial, right line, right concentration. Increase to full MAC dose, I said. We were inside our safety envelope. Doubling to the unhalved figure was still, by every curve in my catalog, a sedating dose and not a killing one for a body of his mass. I expected the bradycardia we had been promised, merely delayed. The line fed again. The saturation column climbed past the band we had drawn for full MAC equivalence. On the table, Doran Webb yawned. But it was the yawn of a man in a slow waiting room, not the drowsiness of a sedative taking hold. I have learned to tell the two apart since, and I could not then, and the difference is the whole story. His heart held. 60-some, unhurried. That was the moment the gallery went quiet in the particular way a room of professionals goes quiet when the reference standard fails. Not panic. Worse than panic. The silence of people who have just watched the ruler they measure the world with refuse to measure something. I should have stopped there. A wise keeper stops at the first impossible number and spends a season understanding it before he asks for a second. I was not wise that cycle. I was a man who had been certain for 61 of them, and certainty, when it cracks, does not make you cautious. It makes you reach for a bigger hammer. Pull 4471, I said. Load entry 0900. Orsel's frill went grayer. He knew the entry. Everyone in the archive knows entry 0900, the way every soldier knows the name of the worst weapon in the locker. It is not a sedative. It is a neural agent the Orifant developed during their civil collapse and then outlawed, on 3 worlds and in 2 treaties, because it does not sedate, it unwrites. It strips the signal between nerve and muscle so completely that the body forgets how to hold its own. Heart shut between beats. There is no antidote catalogued. There is, for 0900, only a dose curve and a single annotation in the margin, in the hand of the keeper before me, that reads, "Never witness survival, any species, any fraction." "Sir," Orsel said. It was almost a question, almost a refusal. "A quarter fraction," I said. "Sublethal by the curve. We are inside the envelope." I believe that. By every number I owned, a quarter fraction of 0900 for a vertebrate of Webb's mass would produce a sharp, frightening, fully reversible tremor and nothing worse. The body's first stagger before the abyss, but not the abyss. I wanted the tremor. I wanted to see this human system finally do the textbook thing, so the cell in my archive could stop being blank. I leaned to the glass. "Mr. Webb, this next compound may make you shake. It will pass. Tell us at once if it does not." He looked up at the gallery, found me behind the glass somehow, and gave a short nod, the nod of a man agreeing to a flu shot. "Whenever you're ready," he said. "But after this, lunch?" I told him yes. After this, lunch. I meant it as the small mercy a keeper offers a subject. I did not yet understand that I had just promised a meal to the only living thing archive could not poison, and that he would in fact get his lunch, and that I would sit across the table from him while he ate it, and that nothing I had believed about the catalogued worlds would survive the conversation. Orsel loaded entry no 900. The cannula fed. The saturation column began once more to climb. I should explain for the young ones reading this who have only ever known the archive as a settled and finished thing what it meant to me before that cycle, so you understand the height I fell from. The compound archive on Rescal Deep is not a library you can argue with. The archive does not argue. When the Mock drew up their poison contingency against the 7, in the bad season of the border collapse, they did not test a single agent against a single 7. They read my column. Entry 2230, the 7 cardiac key, lethal fraction listed to 4 decimals, onset listed to the half-second, antidote window listed and bracketed. They loaded their dispensers off my numbers, and they were right to. The Seven died exactly as my column said they would, in the time my column said, at the fraction my column said. I did not draw a drop of that blood. I only kept the number. But the number was the weapon. The dispenser was just the delivery. That is the kind of authority a poison archive holds, and it is a quiet, enormous authority, the authority of the thing everyone trusts and no one checks. For 61 cycles, I held it without a single entry being proven wrong. Agents went obsolete. Species developed resistances, the catalog grew and pruned itself. But never, not once, did a column simply fail to describe a living body. The archives promise that every body has a number, and I hold it, had never been broken in my keeping or in the keeping of the 4 keepers before me. I tell you this so that you will understand that when entry 4471's cardiac line refused to move on Doran Webb's monitor, I did not first think this human is extraordinary. I thought my instrument is broken. Because in my world, in my whole experience of it, the alternative was unthinkable. A column does not fail. A body does not refuse the number. The cannula must be blocked, the vial mislabeled, the monitor miscalibrated. Anything at all, was more believable to me in that first moment than the truth, which was that a settled middle-aged brewer with a soft belly had just made 11,000 entries of certainty into a list of suggestions. It took me, I'm ashamed to say, 2 more agents and a counsel's worth of denial to arrive where Orsil arrived in the first 90 seconds, standing at the rail with his frill gone gray, saying quietly, "The instrument isn't broken. The instrument is fine. It's the world that's wrong. Hold that. The world is wrong." That is what it feels like the first time a human breaks a thing you were certain of, and every species that has met them has felt it in their own way, in their own science, at their own table. We are simply the ones who felt it in poison. There are others, I have since learned, who felt it in armor, in strength, in the way humans heal, in the way humans do not stop. We are all standing in the same doorway. We just each arrived by a different corridor. And the corridor I arrived by was the one I had spent my life believing was the safest in the building. The clean corridor, the distant corridor, the corridor where you never have to be in the room. Let me take you back to the table, where I had just loaded the abyss. I have watched Entry 0900 work once on archive footage from the Orifant collapse, a captured deserter, a full dose, a recording the keepers preserve as a warning and show to no one twice. It is the fastest terrible thing in the catalog. The body does not slump. It seizes outward, every muscle firing at once, and then the firing stops mid-arc and the body falls the way a marionette falls when the strings are cut all at the same instant. From cannula to that fall in the footage is 19 seconds. I counted the 19 seconds in my head while the saturation column climbed. I had Orsil's hand on the abort. I had the medical team behind us, who could do nothing but who were there. I had drawn a quarter fraction. I had every number on my side. The column reached a quarter fraction. I counted. At 19 seconds, Doran Webb shifted his shoulders against the table, the way a man shifts when a chair has gone uncomfortable, and said, to no one in particular, that the stuff had a taste to it, a metal taste, at the back of the throat, like he'd been chewing on a battery. Then he asked whether that was normal. His heart held, 60-some. The cardiac line did not so much as ripple. The neural conduction monitor, which should by then have shown the signal between his nerves and his muscles dissolving into noise, showed a clean, strong signal carrying on exactly as it had, as if entry 900, the unwriting agent, the abyss with no antidote, the thing that drops every catalogued vertebrate in 19 seconds, had entered Doran Webb's blood, looked around, and decided it had come to the wrong address. Increase, I heard myself say. My voice did not sound like mine. Sir, to half fraction. Half a fraction of 0900 is, by the curve, lethal to every vertebrate I have ever catalogued. I knew that. I gave the order anyway, and I want it on this record that I gave it, because the council has been kind in its account, and I would rather be accurate than kind. I was not running a calibration anymore. I was a man who had built a temple out of a catalog, and the catalog had just been wrong twice, and I needed it to be right so badly that I was willing to risk a treaty subject's life to make it so. That is what certainty does when it dies. It takes hostages. Orsil did not move his hand to the line. Sir, he said again, and this time it was only a refusal. I won't. Look at him. We are past the curve. We are off the document. I will not add a third number to a column that has already told us the column is wrong. I should have thanked him. It took me a long while to thank him. In the moment I was furious, not at Orsil, at the readouts, at the calm man on the table who would not do the thing my whole life said he must do. I put my own hand to the line, and Doran Webb, behind the glass, said, I'd listen to him if I were you. He had heard us. The gallery is sealed. The glass is a hand thick. We speak on a closed channel. He could not have heard us. Except that humans, I would learn, read a room through the glass the way the Mac read a scent on the wind. Posture, the angle of a frill, the stillness of a hand on a control. And Doran Webb had spent a working life among men who decided things over his head, and he knew exactly what was happening in the gallery without hearing a word of it. Not for my sake, he went on, mild, looking up at where he had decided I was. I feel fine, bit of a taste. But you've got a young fella up there who's right, and you're about to make him watch you prove it. That's a hard thing to do to a young fella. He paused. Also, I genuinely like that lunch. I'm not being difficult. I just haven't eaten. I took my hand off the line. I want to describe what was in the gallery in that silence, because the silence is the data. There were 9 of us on the deck, toxicologists, 2 medics, a recording adjutant, and 7 liaison who had come to observe the annex and had not spoken since the cardiac line failed to slow. The 7 liaison spoke now. She said one sentence in her own tongue, and the caller rendered it flatly, and I have never forgotten it. She said, "Your weapon is asking your scientist to be reasonable." That was the first time on that deck that anyone used the word weapon. We had brought a subject. Somewhere between entry 471 and entry 0900, without anyone deciding it, the subject had become the most dangerous object in the room, and the most dangerous object in the room was being patient with us. We stopped the procedure. I ordered the cannula drawn and the agents purged and the medical team to take a full panel, blood, tissue, neural, the works. And I went down to the floor myself, which a keeper is not supposed to do, to look at Doran Webb without a hand of glass between us. He watched me come. The medics were unstrapping him, taking their samples, and he was being agreeable about it, holding still where they asked, offering the vein. There was a flush coming up in his face that I could see, a redness across the cheeks and nose, and a faint sheen of sweat at his hairline, and when he breathed out I caught, even through my own poorer sense of smell, the metal and solvent reek of entry 900 leaving him through his lungs and his skin. His body was not unaffected. I want that understood. He was not immune in the way a stone is immune. The poisons went in. They simply did not win. "You feel that?" I said. I meant it as a question. "Course I feel it." He flexed a hand, watching his own fingers as if checking them off a list. "Feel all of it." The first one made me sleepy for about a second, and then my body sort of noticed and decided not to bother. The last one, he grimaced, a real grimace, the first sign of true discomfort I had seen. "The last one's a mean one. That's a headache I'll have for a day. Tastes like I licked a fence." He looked up at me. "What was it?" I told him. I told him it was entry 0900, a banned Orophant neural agent, that the dose he had absorbed had killed every vertebrate ever exposed to it in 19 seconds, with no exception and no antidote, and that he had taken it and asked about lunch. He thought about that. He did not pale. He did not boast. He turned it over with the mild interest of a man being told the name of a road he has already walked down. 19 seconds, he said. "Huh, then, you probably shouldn't have done that one without asking me more about what I've drunk." "What you've drunk," I repeated. "It's a long story," Doran Webb said, "and I'd tell it better over food. So I bought my weapon lunch. We did not stop after entry 0900. I wish I could tell you we did, that the abyss survival was the bottom of it, and that decency took hold. But the council, when it learned what had happened, did not want one impossible result. They wanted a wall of them, because a single miracle can be a flaw in the instrument and a wall cannot. They ordered a structured panel, a controlled sweep across the agent classes, every drop sublethal by the curve, every result logged. They wanted to find the one class of poison that worked. So, over the next 2 days, with Doran Webb's written consent, which he gave with a shrug and a request that we keep feeding him, we went down the archive class by class, and I watched my catalog die one family at a time. We tried the corrosives next, the contact agents, the ones that do not need to be metabolized because they burn what they touch, the class the officers were sure would work, because there is no liver in the world that outthinks acid. Entry 3380, a mock demolition agent that blisters 7 skin to the bone in seconds. We applied a sub-injury fraction to the inside of Webb's forearm, the soft skin, the place it should have raised a weeping burn. It raised a redness, a patch of irritation, angry and real. He winced. He called it a good sting. And then, over the next hour while we watched, his skin closed the insult and began visibly to repair it. The corrosive was not a key either. It was a scrape. His body filed it under scrape and went to work on it the way it had gone to work on 1,000. Scrapes and the demolition agent that stripped Steven to the bone became, on a human forearm, a mark he'd have by evening and forget by morning. We tried the neurotoxins, the venoms, the class drawn from the worst living things the catalogued worlds had ever found. Entry 5102, distilled from a Orophant deep hunter, a venom so refined that a fraction the size of a tear stops a Mac heart between one beat and the next. We gave Webb a measured dose. His heart did not stop between one beat and the next. His arm, where we dosed it, swelled, a real swelling, hot and tight, and this one hurt him. I saw it in his jaw the first time he'd gone quiet under us, and then the swelling peaked and held and slowly, over the afternoon, began to recede, and Doran Webb flexed the arm and said it felt like a bad bee and asked whether bees had made it out to our part of the galaxy yet. I did not know what a bee was. I have since looked it up. The thing he compared the worst venom in my archive to was a small flying insect from his homeworld that he had been stung by as a child in a garden more times than he could count. He had filed entry 5102 under childhood. We tried the sedatives, the whole class, because the officers had a theory that the liver foundry was a metabolic defense and a true sedative works on the nerves directly, below the liver's reach. Entry 1190, entry 1191, the 7 surgical line, The agents that fold a patient under so completely, the heart must be paced by machine. We gave Webb a full surgical dose of 1190 and he got sleepy, genuinely sleepy, his eyes going heavy, his words slowing. And the gallery leaned in as one body because here at last was a poison doing the textbook thing. And then, at the moment the curve said he should be under, fully under, machine paced, Doran Webb yawned, rubbed his face with both hands the way a man does to shake off tiredness, blinked himself back and said, "Woof, that one's got a kick." Felt that one. His body had let the sedative make him tired, had even, I think, enjoyed the rest of it on some level, and then, when the dose reached the depth that would have switched a 7 off, his system simply declined the last step, the way a tired man declines to fall asleep at a meeting he has decided to stay awake through. That was the dose that frightened me most, and I have thought a long time about why. The corrosive he survived by healing, the venom he survived by enduring, but the sedative he survived by, in some sense, choosing. His body reached the threshold of unconsciousness, and his system held the line at it, kept a hand on the door, refused to let the chemical do the last thing chemicals are for, which is to take the decision away from you. We poison to take the decision away. That is the entire purpose of a sedative in a war, to remove a body's vote on whether it stays in the fight. And a human body, dosed to the surgical depth, kept its vote, yawned and kept its vote. The 7 liaison watched the sedative dose from the back of the gallery, and after Webb blinked himself awake, she crossed the deck to me, which she had not done before, and stood at my shoulder looking down at the man on the table. "On my world," she said through the collar, "we have a word for a creature you cannot put to sleep, cannot poison, cannot burn into stillness. We use it for the old gods. The ones the early people prayed to so that the gods would not turn their attention downward." She watched Webb settle back against the table and ask, mildly, what was next. We did not think we would meet one across a research table, being agreeable, asking for lunch. I find I would have preferred the old gods. At least we never had to share a treaty annex with them. There was one class we had skipped on the first day, and the council made us go back for it, because it was the class they had quietly believed in all along. The accumulators, the patient poisons. Most of the archive is built on speed, the drop that works between one breath and the next before the body can respond. But there is an older, crueler branch of the catalog, agents that do not strike at all, that the body cannot recognize as an attack because they do not behave like one, that slip in below the threshold of any defense and build, dose upon dose, season upon season, until the body is poisoned not by any single drop but by the sum of 1,000 of them. Heavy metal compounds, bioaccumulants, the poisons of attrition. The officer's theory was elegant and, I admit, frightening. Perhaps the human foundry, so good at the sudden agent, was blind to the patient one. Perhaps you could not kill a human with a drop, but you could kill a human with a tide. Feed the agent slow. Below the foundry's notice, let it gather in the bone and the fat where the liver does not reach, and wait. We could not test attrition on Doran Webb in 2 days. Attrition is a poison of years. So the medics modeled it, building the tide against the chemistry the panel had given them. And they ran the long accumulators against the human system across a simulated lifetime, and I sat with that result too, and it was the only one that did not come back clean. The accumulators worked, sort of. The model showed that a human, fed certain heavy compounds below the threshold of response over a span of years, would in fact accumulate them, would in fact be harmed, would in fact eventually sicken and die of the burden. For an afternoon the officers had their key, and the chamber had a strange grim energy, the energy of people who have found the bottom of a thing at last. Then Tessel, the old mock medic, took the result apart gently the way he took everything apart. The accumulators worked, he said, but look at what working meant. The model required years. It required continuous, uninterrupted, undetected dosing of a single human across a span longer than most field campaigns. Last, in quantities that would, over that span, total a delivered mass of poison absurd beyond any battlefield logic. And this was the part that ended the chamber's grim energy. It required the human not to notice. But the same human foundry that cleared the sudden agents did not ignore the patient ones. It cleared them too, only slower, fighting the tide the whole way, so that the dose required to overcome the clearance and actually accumulate was itself enormous. And a human carrying that burden would feel it, would sicken visibly, would seek help, would have the burden found and collated out by their own medicine, which, Tessel noted, reading from the Human Medical Annex, humans had independently developed, because of course they had, because a species that lives among accumulating poisons learns to pull them back out of the bone, the way a species that lives among floods learns to build on stilts. So yes, Tessel concluded, you may kill a human with patience. You may kill anything with enough patience. But examine the requirement. To poison one human by attrition, you must dose them secretly, continuously, For years, with a massive agent that would drop a city of any other species, while they do not flee, do not seek treatment, do not notice, and do not pull it back out, none of which a real human will oblige you by doing. He set the result down. It is not a key. It is a fantasy of a key. It is what a key would look like if you needed one badly enough to imagine the human standing perfectly still for a decade while you poured. The threat assessment was revised that evening. I have a copy of the revision because revisions of the threat assessment crossed the keeper's desk for the chemical annotation. The previous assessment had rated the human species, for chemical purposes, as unclassified pending data. The revised assessment struck pending and wrote in its place a classification I had never seen used in 61 cycles, a classification that exists in the manual for theoretical completeness and had never, in my keeping, been applied to a living species, chemically inaccessible, no agent, no dose, no accumulator, no patience, inaccessible. The manual's definition of the term, which I read that night for the first time as something other than a hypothetical, is this: an entity against which the chemical arm of war does not apply, and against which all planning must assume direct engagement only. Direct engagement only, in the room, with your hands. The manual had a word for the thing the brewer had described to me, and the word was a rating, and the rating been sitting in the book my whole life, empty, waiting for the species that would finally earn it. The panel came back while he ate, and the panel was, if anything, worse than the table. The medics had been thorough. They wanted, as I wanted, to find the mechanism, the special organ, the engineered enzyme, the secret the humans had built into this one volunteer to make him useless to us as a poisoning subject. They expected to find a modification. What they found was a man. There was no special organ. There was no engineered enzyme, no implant, no gene craft, nothing on the panel that was not, by Earth's own reference ranges, ordinary for a human male of his years. That was the part that took the floor out from under me. If Doran Webb had been built, a soldier model, a poison eater bred for the annex, I could have filed him as an exception, a weapon disguised as a volunteer, a thing outside the natural curve. The archive could have survived an exception. What the archive could not survive was the medics' flat conclusion, delivered to me on the floor while my weapon worked through a bowl of our reconstituted protein and pronounced it, not bad, bit salty. This is a normal one. This is what they all do. I made the lead medic repeat it. He repeated it. The human liver, and to a lesser degree the human kidney, the human lung, the lining of the human gut, is not a passive filter the way ours largely are. It is a chemical foundry. It runs a standing arsenal of enzymes whose entire purpose is to take a foreign molecule the body has never seen before, recognize it as foreign by its mere foreignness, and dismantle it, break the bonds, blunt the active sites, wrap the pieces in a water-loving handle, and flush them out. We have versions of this. Every catalogued vertebrate does. But ours are narrow. Ours are tuned to the poisons of our own worlds, the toxins our ancestors actually met, and confronted with a wholly novel molecule, our systems hesitate. They have no tool shape for it. So the poison does its work while the body is still deciding what the poison is. The human system does not hesitate. The human system, the medic said, treats novelty itself as the signal. It does not need to have met a poison before. It assumes that anything strange is something to be torn apart, and it has the standing machinery to begin tearing the moment the strange thing arrives. Entry 0900 was novel to Doran Webb. His liver did not know it was the abyss with no antidote. His liver knew only that something it had never catalogued was in the blood, and it began, within seconds, to do to entry 0900 exactly what it had spent a lifetime doing to every fermented drink and industrial solvent and burnt meal Doran Webb had ever put into himself. It took the molecule apart faster than the molecule could take him apart. That's the brewer thing, I said slowly, beginning to see it. And the solvents. The medic confirmed it, and Webb, overhearing, confirmed it more plainly than the medic could. You spend 20 years drinking what you make, he said, and 20 years before that breathing what strips paint. Your body gets good at the cleanup. It's a muscle. You work it, it grows. He tapped his own side over the liver with the easy familiarity of a man who has been told by his own doctors that the organ is doing more than its share. Mine's done a lot of overtime. But here's the thing your fella keeps trying to tell you and you keep not hearing. He set the bowl down. I'm not special. Take any human off any street. Never had a drink in their life. Cleanest liver you ever saw. You put your entry, whatever, in them, and it'll take a few seconds longer, that's all. The factory's still in there. Comes standard. We just don't think about it, because to us it's just not dying of stuff. We don't even have a word for it. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. The caller struggled with the idiom and rendered it as an ordinary recurring day, and the 7 liaison, standing apart, made a low sound in her chest that I have since learned is what the 7 do instead of going pale. I asked him, and I am not proud of the hope in the question, whether there was at least a poison Earth itself feared. Surely on a whole world, there was a molecule that beat this standing factory of his. Some venom, some compound, something we could catalog as the human's terminal entry, so that the column would not be blank, so that there would be a number. He thought about it honestly, which somehow was worse than if he'd said no quickly. Sure, he said, plenty of things will kill you. Too much of anything. Right poison, right dose, you go down like anybody. He shrugged. But that's the trick of it, isn't it? With us, it's always a dose problem, never a kind problem. There's no stuff our bodies just surrender to on contact because they've never seen it. Give us enough of anything and we die. But we don't have what'd you call it, a master key. A little drop of the right thing that just switches us off no matter how strong we are. He looked almost apologetic. You've got those, I reckon. Most of you. A drop and you're done. We're more of a grind-you-down job. You have to mean it. You have to mean it. I wrote that on the record that night, in my own hand in the margin of entry 0900, beneath the old keeper's never witnessed survival, any species, any fraction. I wrote one witness survival. Human. Mechanism. There is no master key. To kill them you must mean it, and bring more than you can carry. Then I sat in the empty gallery for a long time with the archive open on the rail in front of me, 11,000 entries, every one of which I had trusted that morning, and I understood that I was not looking at a catalog of poisons anymore. I was looking at a catalog of master keys, a record, world by world, of the single drop that switches each species off. The 7 key, the MAC key, the Oriphant key, my own 11,000 locks, and for every species in the catalog galaxy, a key except one. One column with no key in it. Not because we hadn't found the key yet, because there wasn't one to find. When the structured panel ran out, when we had taken Door and Webb down every class of agent the archive holds and found a key in none of them, medics did the thing scientists do when the body in front of them refuses to make sense. They stopped dosing the body and started modeling it. If we could not find the poison that beat the human in the room, perhaps we could find it in simulation, and so they built him. They built a model of Door and Webb's chemistry out of the panel data, every enzyme system, every clearance rate, every standing concentration, and they ran the entire archive against the model, all 11,000 entries at every dose, in a simulation that took the Foundry's machinery and asked it for each agent. Can the human clear this faster than it can kill him? It is the cleanest way I know to ask whether a key exists. You do not need to dose 1,000 humans. You build one out of numbers, and you throw the whole catalog at him, and you watch the model for the place where the catalog wins. The simulation ran for a day and a half. I sat with it for most of that, watching entries resolve one after another, each one returning the same verdict in the medics' flat notation. Cleared, cleared, cleared. The model's liver took entry after entry apart, the rate of clearance rising to meet the threat the way a worked muscle rises to meet a load, and entry after entry came back cleared, and the officers who had ordered the simulation in hope of a key began one by one to stop coming to watch it. There were exactly 4 entries, out of 11,000 that the model could not clear at field deliverable doses. 4 officers seized on them like drowning men, 4 keys, 4 ways the catalog was not empty after all. I had to take that hope away too, and I did it carefully, because hope dies hard in a war council, and I did not enjoy killing it. All 4 were agents that do not work the way a poison works. 2 were not poisons at all. They were radiological, agents that damage by the energy they shed rather than by any chemistry a liver can dismantle. And against those the human foundry is no defense because there is nothing to metabolize. The damage is done by physics, not chemistry, and you cannot file physics under scrape. The other 2 were dose overwhelm cases, agents the model could not clear only because the deliverable dose was so enormous, so far past anything a quartermaster would ever load, that the simulation flagged them not as keys, but as exactly the drumknot flask problem Door and Webb had described to me over a bowl of protein. They were not keys. They were proof that there were no keys, dressed up as keys. So I gave the council its real number, the one the simulation had cost a day and a half and a man's blood to produce. Against humans of 11,000 cataloged chemical agents, the number that function as true poisons, that defeat the body by being themselves, by their chemistry, the way a drop defeats every other species, is 0. The 2 radiological entries are not poisons. They are how you irradiate a thing, and you can irradiate anything, a human no more easily than a wall. The 2 overwhelm entries are not poisons. They are a logistics fantasy. The chemical column for the human species, honestly kept, holds 11,000 entries, and every one of them is marked in the corrected notation the same. Insufficient. Not insufficient data. Insufficient agent. The drop is not strong enough. The drop will never be strong enough because the drop's whole power is surprise. And you cannot surprise a body that treats existence itself as an ambush already in progress. The lead medic. An old mock Nestle who had run more poison panels than anyone alive and who I had never seen rattled gave me his finding in person rather than on the rail, which was its own kind of warning. He said the human metabolic defense was not, properly speaking, a defense at all. A defense implies a specific threat anticipated. This was something stranger and worse. The human system, he said, did not anticipate poisons. It anticipated everything. It ran at all times a standing assumption that any molecule it had not personally built was hostile, and it kept the machinery to act on that assumption hot, idling, ready, in an organ the human never thinks about. It is not that they evolved resistance to our poisons, Tessel said. They have never met our poisons. They evolved resistance to the category of poison, to the idea. They are immune to a thing we have not invented yet and to a thing we never will. He paused. I have spent my life cataloging keys. I did not know until this season that I have been cataloging a kindness, that the existence of a key means the lock at least consents to be picked. This species does not consent. There is no key because there is no lock. There is only a door and a person behind it, and the person is the only way through, and the person will be looking at you. The thing about an archive is that it is not only a record, it is a promise. When a fleet quartermaster requisitions an agent against a species, he is trusting the column I keep. He does not test it himself. There is no time in a war to test it. He reads my number, and he loads the dispenser, and he trusts that the drop will do what my catalog says the drop will do. Every poison contingency the catalogued worlds had ever drawn against an enemy rested on the assumption that my archive was complete, and my numbers were keys. Which meant that the morning Doran Webb asked for more. Every poison contingency against humans, on every world that held one, became a contingency against an empty column. The dispensers were loaded with master keys for a lock that did not exist. I did not sleep that night, and I was not the only one. By the third hour, Reskel Deep's senior counsel had convened, not because I had reported the result formally, but because the 7 liaison had reported it to her own people the moment she left the floor, and a thing like that does not stay on one deck. By dawn, there were officers in my archive who had never set foot in it, military people, the kind who think of my 11,000 entries as a weapons locker and of me as its quartermaster, and they had a single question, and they asked it the way frightened, powerful people ask questions, which is as an accusation. Was there nothing? Surely, Keeper, there was something. We are the catalogued worlds. We have 11,000 agents. You are telling us that against this one species we have 11,000 keys and not one lock. I told them the truth. I told them it was worse than that. I told them that it was not that we lacked the right key. It was that the human had taught me, over a bowl of salty protein, that the entire science of the master key was a science that worked only against bodies whose chemistry hesitates. Again, against a body that treats all novelty as an enemy and dismantles it on sight, there is no clever molecule to discover, because the cleverness of a poison is precisely that it slips past a body that does not recognize it, and the human recognizes everything by recognizing nothing in particular. You cannot ambush a system whose entire strategy is to assume every stranger is a threat and tear it apart. Then enough of any of it, an officer said. Brute volume. If there's no key, break the door. You can, I said. He told me you can. Too much of anything kills them. But hear what that means in a quartermaster's terms. A master key is a flask. You carry a flask, you defeat a species. What you are describing, enough of any agent to overwhelm that factory by sheer mass before it can work, is not a flask. For a single human, against the kind of agents we are discussing, it is barrels, drums. You would have to deliver to one human body a quantity of poison that for any other species would be an absurd, wasteful, unthinkable surplus, and you would have to deliver all of it faster than the liver can clear it, which for a determined human in the field, dosed slow, is a window that keeps closing on you. I let that land. We do not build weapons around drums per enemy, we build them around drops. The drop does not work, and the drum is not a weapon. It is a logistics problem you cannot win. The officer who had spoken sat down. He was, I think, doing the arithmetic that I had done in the night. The arithmetic of a fleet that has just learned its entire chemical arm is, against this one enemy, a quartermaster's fantasy. We had spent generations refining the drop. The drop was elegant. The drop was deniable, transportable, decisive. And the drop against humans was a man asking for lunch. There was a quieter voice at the back of the chamber. An old strategist, Hennick by name, who had said nothing through the shouting and who now said the thing that ended the meeting. You are all asking the wrong question, Hennick said. You are asking how we poison them. Stop. Ask instead what it tells us about them, that this is true. A species whose ordinary, unremarkable, standard body answers every poison in the catalog galaxy with the same shrug. What kind of world makes that? What was coming at them day after day for long enough that their bodies learned to treat the unknown itself as the enemy and built a standing foundry to dismantle it before it could be understood. He looked around the chamber, at the officers, at me. We cataloged poisons because we met a few and remembered them. They built a body that doesn't need to remember, because on their world the next poison was always already on its way. We are a people who learn the names of our enemies. They are people who stop bothering with the names. No one answered him. The collar had no trouble with that sentence, and the chamber had no reply to it. I went back down to the floor after the meeting broke, because the annex required me to certify Doran Webb's fitness for return, and because I found I wanted to see him once more before he became, in my archive, a closed column and a margin note. He was packed. The duffel was over his shoulder again. He looked, in the cool light of the receiving bay, like exactly what the panel said he was. An ordinary settled human male, soft at the middle, gray in the beard, a working life behind him, no weapon anywhere on his body or in it. "They're scared of me upstairs," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd read it through 2 walls and a council chamber's worth of glass. "Yes," I said. "They shouldn't be scared of me," he said. "I'm nobody. I told you. Take any of us off any street." He hitched the duffel. "If you're going to be scared of the right thing. The military, having lost the simulation, did the next thing the military does. It went looking for the times this had already happened and not been understood, because a thing this large does not announce itself at a research table for the first time. A thing this large has been leaving marks across the record for as long as the cataloged worlds have been near humans, and we had simply filed the marks under other headings, the way you do when the true heading is unthinkable. They pulled the field archive. Every engagement, every incident, every post-action report from any front where chemical agents had been deployed against a human element. The strategist Hennick ran the review, and he brought the results to the chamber on a screen, and I sat through it, and it was the worst afternoon of my professional life, because I had been the keeper the whole time these reports came in, and I had read every one of them, and I had filed every one of them wrong. The first was from the 7 border itself, 11 cycles before the annex. A human picket position, 4 soldiers holding a culvert against a mock advance. The mock, unable to dislodge them by fire, had done the sensible thing and gassed the culvert, entry 3380, the corrosive class, the contact agent, delivered by canister into an enclosed space, a dose that should have emptied the position in under a minute. The after-action report, which I had read at the time and approved, noted that the position held longer than projected and that the human element withdrew under their own power after expending ammunition. The report filed it as a ventilation failure on the mock side. The gas must not have reached the enclosed space. At lethal concentration, a canister must have seated wrong. I had signed off on that explanation. It was the only explanation the archive allowed. Hennick played the recovered Mac helmet record. The gas had reached the space. The concentration meter on the canister read full deployment. And the 4 humans in the culvert had stayed at their firing positions. In the gas, in entry 3380 at lethal concentration, coughing, you could hear it on the record, the terrible wet coughing, eyes streaming, skin blistering at the exposed wrists and throats, and kept firing. Not because they didn't feel it. The record is clear that they felt every bit of it. One of them was screaming between shots. They stayed because the gas, which empties a 7 position in under a minute, was to them a thing that hurt enormously and did not kill them fast enough to make them leave, and they had decided not to leave. They withdrew, as the report said, under their own power, when the ammunition ran out, not when the gas reached them. The Mac who recovered that helmet record had written, in the margin of his own report, a single line that the catalogued worlds had filed and forgotten: "We did not have enough gas. There is not enough gas." There were 40 more like it. A human medical evacuation that flew out of a neurotoxin saturation zone with a full complement. The pilots dosed past the lethal fraction, landing the craft and then asking for the burn kit. A human prisoner who had been interrogated on a captured base with a sedative truth agent that loosens any catalog tongue, and who had gone loose and dreamy and friendly under it, exactly as the agent promised, and chatted amiably with his interrogators about his garden and his children and the weather on his homeworld, and told them, in his dreamy friendly haze, nothing of any military value whatsoever, because the agent loosened his tongue and could not loosen his judgment, and a human at his most chemically disinhibited is, it turns out, still a human who knows what he is not going to say. The interrogators had filed it as a defective batch. Hennick played the recording. It was not a defective batch. It was a man poisoned into honesty, who was honestly, warmly, gently telling them to go to hell, and meaning no harm by it, and giving up nothing. 41 incidents. 41 times the catalogued worlds had put a poison into humans in the field, expecting the textbook result, and gotten the human result, and filed the human result under equipment failure, bad batch, ventilation error, defective seal, under anything at all rather than the true heading, because the true heading would have meant admitting that our entire chemical arm, the clean arm, the distant arm, the arm we were proudest of, did not function against this enemy and never had. The officers in the chamber were very quiet during the field review. These were not researchers. These were people who had loaded those canisters and signed off on those evacuations and ordered those interrogations. And they were watching, on the screen, every clean victory they thought their chemistry had bought them turn out to have been a human deciding, through pain and blister and dreamy disinhibition, that they would not break the way the column said they would break. 41 times we had told ourselves the drop worked, and the field had quietly answered, "There is not enough gas," and we had not heard it, because we did not have the one piece of data that made the 41 reports legible, and we did not have it until a brewer lay down on my table and asked, halfway through the abyss, whether the procedure took much longer, because he had not eaten. I asked him what the right thing was. I had by then stopped being his keeper and started being his student, though neither of us said so. "That you can't poison us," he said, "is the small thing. I know it doesn't feel small to you, with your whole filing cabinet up there gone useless overnight. But it's small, next to why you can't." He set the duffel down again. He was going to give me the lesson straight, and I have repeated it on this record exactly as he gave it, because I have never improved on it. "You poison a thing," Doran Webb said, "to kill it without facing it. That's the whole point of the drop, isn't it? You don't have to fight the 7 if you can put the 7 key in their water. You don't have to be brave. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to be there. The poison's a way of not having to mean it. You set it down and you walk away and the thing dies on its own and your hands are clean and you were never in the room." He let that sit. We grew up somewhere that wouldn't let us do that. Everything on our world was already trying the poison route on us. All the time. From before we had names for it. The water, the air, the bite, the bad meat, the rotten season. Stuff in the dirt that had dropped one of your people on contact. We'd been wading through it since we were children. So our bodies stopped treating poison like a special event and started treating it like weather. You don't flinch at weather. You build for it. You grow the foundry, and you keep it lit, and you stop noticing it's there. He tapped his side again over the liver. And once you can't be killed the easy way, the cheap way, the clean way, the not having to mean it way, you grow up understanding something the whole rest of your galaxy seems to have skipped. You understand that anything worth doing to a person, you have to do to their face, with your hands, while they look at you, meaning it. That's the thing to be scared of, he said. Not that the poison doesn't work. That we come from a place that taught us, in the body and the blood, that there are no shortcuts. You want to be rid of a human, there's no flask for it. You have to come and mean it, and we will see you coming. Because we have been watched by hungry things since before we could walk, and we will be looking right at you the whole time. Your whole way of war is built on not having to mean it. Ours doesn't have that option. It never did. He picked the duffel back up. "You strap me to a table and put the worst thing in your cabinet into my blood," he said, without heat. "And I asked for lunch. That's not because I'm brave. I'm not. That's because somewhere down the line my body decided your worst thing was just Tuesday, and it never asked me. I'm the least frightening man you'll meet. I just come from a frightening place, and it left its fingerprints all over the inside of me, and you can't wash them off, and neither can I." I certified his fitness. I walked him to the transit myself, which a keeper does not do, and which I did anyway. At the lock, he turned and shook my hand in the human way, dry and firm, and I felt in the grip nothing remarkable at all, an ordinary settled male, soft at the middle, and that ordinariness was the most frightening thing I touched in 61 cycles of keeping the deadliest catalog in the arm. "Eat something," he told me. "You look like you've had a day." Then the lock closed and Doran Webb went home, and I went back up to my archive to do the only thing left to a keeper whose catalog has been proven a fiction. I went to correct the record. Of the 10 volunteers, it is the soldier I think about most, because the soldier said the thing that the brewer had only implied, and said it without softening it, and I have carried it longer than I have carried any single entry in the archive. He came to us in the second wave of the cohort, after Doran Webb had gone home, and the council had refused to believe a brewer could be the floor. I had asked for a soldier specifically. I had a theory, a desperate one, by then, that the human resistance might be a thing of soft civilian living, of bodies that drank and ate and worked at fermentation and solvents, and so had thickened their foundries by accident, and that a soldier, lean, trained, his body honed for war rather than for the bottle, might have traded away the metabolic slack and become, finally, poisonable. It was a foolish theory. I knew it was foolish even as I requisitioned him. But I needed the column to have a key somewhere for someone, and the soldier was my last place to look. His name was Marek Sold. He was younger than Webb, Hard where Webb was soft, quiet in the way that certain dangerous people are quiet, not shy, just economical. A man who had learned that words spent are words you cannot take back. He read the consent annex carefully, which none of the others had, asked 2 precise questions about what we intended and what the recovery looked like, and then signed it and lay down on the table with the composure of a man who has lain down in worse places to be done worse things. I ran him through the same sweep, the same classes, the same fractions, the cardiac sedative and the corrosive and the venom and the surgical agent. And Marek Sold's foundry was not thinner than the brewer's. It was, if anything, a touch more efficient, a younger liver, a fitter system, clearing the agents at the ordinary human rate with the ordinary human shrug, the cardiac line never wavering, the neural conduction holding clean. My last theory died on his monitor the way all the others had died, quietly, without drama, the column simply refusing the number one more time. When it was done, when I had given him entry 0900, the abyss, and he had taken it and asked for water, I came down to the floor, because by then I always came down to the floor, and I asked him the question I had stopped being able not to ask. I asked him whether it frightened him, lying there, knowing what we were putting into him, knowing that each agent had emptied worlds. Whether, underneath the composure, there was fear. Marek Sold thought about it the way Webb had thought about things. Honestly, without performance, taking the question seriously because I had asked it seriously. No, he said. Then because he saw that wasn't enough, he gave me the rest of it. Not of the poison. You learn early it doesn't really work on us. Not learn it like a fact. Learn it like you learn the ground is solid. It's just true. The first time something's supposed to drop you and doesn't, you stop expecting it to. So no, I wasn't scared lying there. He sat up, slow, testing the agent's lingering ache in his joints, finding it and dismissing it. What I'll tell you, though, is what it does to you, growing up knowing that, knowing the easy way doesn't take, because it changes what you're afraid of. What are you afraid of, I said. Each other, Marek Sold said, only ever each other. Think it through. If poison worked on us, if there were a drop, a key, a quiet way, then the worst thing in the world would be the quiet way. You'd spend your life afraid of your water, your food, the stranger with the vial. But it doesn't work on us, so the quiet way was never the thing to fear. The only way anyone could ever really get at us was to come to be there, in the room, with their hands, meaning it. So that's the only thing we ever learned to fear, not the poison. The person who's willing to come do it the hard way, looking at you, because they couldn't do it the easy way. He stood, found his coat, put it on, makes us hard to scare with the things that scare everybody else. And it makes us very, very serious about the one thing that's left. You can't poison a human. But you can absolutely make a human decide you're the kind of problem that has to be solved in the room. And we are extremely good at solving problems in the room. We've had to be. It's the only kind we ever really had. Before he left the floor, he stopped at the rail where the cohort data scrolled, and he looked at it, the 10 curves, the 10 clearances, the 10 quiet refusals of the column, with the unhurried attention of a man reading a map of ground he already knows. He found his own curve among them and did not linger on it. He found the brewers and the teachers and the old mans and traced the spread between them with one finger, the 50-second gap that was the whole difference between the most poison-trained human alive and a woman who drank tea. That's the part that should keep you up, he said, not turning around, not that none of us broke, that we're all so close together. You were hoping I'd be the one who was different, the soldier, the hard case, the exception. But there's no exception. The teacher and me were the same machine, the old man dying of age, same machine, just slower. He turned then. You keep looking for the human you can poison. There isn't one. There's just us, all of us, the same all the way down, factory fitted, off the shelf. That's not a weapon you can plan around, Keeper. That's a fact you have to live next to. He shook my hand at the lock. The same dry human grip the brewer had given me. The same complete absence of anything remarkable in it. Your archive up there, he said, nodding at the deck above us. All those keys. I'd hang on to them. Just don't ever let it fool you into thinking the keys are the dangerous part. The dangerous part's always going to be the species that doesn't need one. Then he was gone, and I went back up to the archive, and I did not requisition another soldier, because I no longer had any theory left for one to disprove. Correcting the record took the better part of a season, and it did not go the way I expected, because the council did not want it corrected. They wanted it confirmed. They did not believe me. That is the truth, and I understand it now better than I did then. A single subject, a brewer, a man with a working liver, and a story about solvents, is not to a military council proof of anything except that we had drawn a strange volunteer. Perhaps the humans had sent us their one freak, their poison eater, and laughed all the way home. Perhaps Doran Webb was the exception, and the column would fill in normally with the next 10 subjects. The officers wanted the next 10 subjects. They wanted me to dose a sample, a proper cohort, and find the human master key that one stubborn brewer had merely happened to lack. So we did it again. The annex allowed for a research cohort, and over that season the humans sent us 9 more volunteers because we asked, and they shrugged and sent them, the way you'd send people to give blood. A young woman who taught children, an old man near the end of his working years, a soldier, which I had asked for specifically, thinking a soldier might have been hardened by training into something the rest of them weren't. A pair of siblings, a clerk, a pilot, none of them brewers, none of them solvent handlers. The young teacher told us mildly that the strongest thing she drank was tea and asked if we needed her to fast beforehand. I want to be clinical about what those 9 taught us, because the clinic is where the dread lives in this niche, not in anyone's scream. The young teacher who drank only tea cleared entry 4471, the gentle reference standard, the draft beast sedative, in 140 seconds. Slower than Doran Webb, yes. Her foundry was not in overtime. It had not been worked the way his had, but it was there, lit, standing, doing the same job by the same mechanism. 140 seconds against 90 for the man who drunk his own beer for 20 years. That was the whole difference between the most poison-trained human we could find and a school teacher who drank tea. A spread of 50 seconds. Not a kind difference, a dose difference, exactly as he'd told me. The old man near the end of his years was slowest of all, and the officers brightened at his curve. Finally, a human whose foundry was failing, a key we might cut for the elderly at least. Then his panel came back and the medic explained almost gently that the old man's liver was not failing in any way that helped us. It was simply an old human liver, working at the unhurried pace of an old human liver, and it cleared every agent we gave it eventually, taking its time the way old men take their time and arriving every time at the same place. The human not poisoned, asking when he could go. The soldier was the one that broke the council's hope for good, because the soldier was not stronger than the teacher. He was the same. The training the officers had pinned their last theory on lived in his mind and his hands, not his liver, and his liver did not know he was a soldier and did not care. It cleared what we gave it at the ordinary human rate, and the soldier sat through it, with the bored patience of a man who has waited in worse rooms. When I told him, as I had told Doran Webb, what entry 0900 had done to every other species, he nodded once and said figures, and asked for water. 9 more witnessed survivals, 9 more, of every age and trade and disposition, with no master key among them, no exception, no freak. Just 9 ordinary humans whose ordinary unremarkable bodies did, each in their own time, the same impossible Tuesday. The cohort did not give the council its key. The cohort took away the council's last comfort, which was the hope that Doran Webb had been a fluke. He was not a fluke, he was the floor. He was, as he had insisted, the least of them. That was when the meeting changed character. The officers stopped asking me for a key and started asking the strategist Hennick's question, the one I had not been able to answer in the night. What kind of world makes this standard? And we had the cohort now, 10 humans deep, to make the question unbearable. Because if the poison-trained brewer and the tea-drinking teacher and the old man and the soldier all came factory-fitted with a foundry that no agent in 11,000 could overwhelm with a single drop, then the foundry was not a thing some humans had. It was a thing humans were. It was as standard as their pulse. And a body does not come standard with a defense unless the attack was standard first. You do not build a wall that thick against a thing that came once. I put that in the corrected record too. Beneath one witness survival, I wrote, not 1, 10 of 10. The trait is not exceptional. It is the species. They are not a people who survived poison. They are people poison gave up on, generation by generation, until the giving up was bred into the blood and they stopped noticing they carried it. The news did not stay on Rescal Deep, however much the council wished it would. A thing learned by 10 species worth of liaisons in a chamber full of officers does not stay sealed, and within 2 seasons the human chemical column, the real one, the empty one, was an open secret in every quartermaster's office in the arm, traded in the careful sideways way that armies trade the facts they are forbidden to write down. I watched what the secret did to them, and it is the last escalation I will record because it taught me more about my own people than about the humans. The Mach, who had built the most elegant poison contingencies in the catalogued worlds, whose whole doctrine was the clean kill, the agent in the supply line, the war won before the enemy knew it had started, went very quiet. Their entire strategic posture toward humans had assumed the drop. Take that assumption away, and a Mach general is left holding a doctrine with a hole in the middle of it, and the hole is human-shaped, and through the hole he can see the only thing his doctrine was built to avoid, a war he would have to fight in the room, with his hands, against an enemy who could not be quietly removed and who had spent its whole evolutionary history learning to fear exactly nothing except him, in the room, with his hands. The MAC did not declare anything. They simply, over the following cycles, stopped probing the human border, and the analysts who study such things wrote that the MAC had deprioritized the human theater, and only a few of us knew that what the analysts were politely describing was a predator people discovering that their prey could not be poisoned, and quietly deciding to hunt something else. I had one MAC quartermaster come to me directly. Off any record, the cycle the assessment was revised. He was old, older than me, a man who had spent 40 cycles loading dispensers off my numbers and who had, by his own count, ended 3 border campaigns with agents drawn from my column without ever once standing in the room where they worked. He did not ask me whether the human finding was true. He had read it. He believed it. He asked me something quieter and worse. He asked me how many of his clean victories, the ones he was proud of, the ones that had made his name, had been clean at all, or whether the human elements in those theaters had simply been the ones the gas did not move, and whether the campaigns had ended not because his poison won, but because the humans, having buried their dead and coughed out their lungs, had decided the ground was not worth the rest of it. I told him I did not know. The archive does not record what the enemy decides. It records only what the agent does, and against humans the agent does nothing. And so the column, for those campaigns, is silent on the only thing that mattered. He sat with that. Then he said the thing the whole mock doctrine was, in the end, too proud to say aloud. I have spent my life being the kind of soldier who never had to be brave. I find I have been lucky, not skilled. There was always a species across the line that the column could not touch, and I never met it, and I built my whole reputation on the ones it could. He left without finishing the drink I had poured him. I do not blame him. It is a hard thing, late in a long career, to learn that your craft was a way of avoiding the only test that was ever real. The Oriphant who had made entry 0900, the abyss with no antidote, reacted differently and worse. They asked through proper channels, formally, for the human metabolic data. All of it. The panel, the cohort, the simulation. They said it was for defensive research. No one believed them. The Oriphant do not do defensive research. They do the other kind. They wanted the data because a people who has built its identity around possessing the worst poison in the catalog cannot bear to learn that their worst poison is, to someone, a headache and a metal taste, and they were going to spend a generation and a fortune trying to build the agent that finally worked. And they were going to fail because Tessel's finding holds. You cannot build a key for a lock that does not exist. But they were going to try. I sent them the data. The council ordered it, and I sent it. I think about those Oriphant chemists sometimes. Generations of them bent over their benches, trying to invent the molecule that surprises a body that cannot be surprised. And I do not envy them their lives' work, which is to discover, slowly and at great expense, the thing a brewer told me over lunch in an afternoon. The Oriphant did send me one thing, 2 cycles later, unsolicited, a sealed brief marked for the keeper's eyes, that I think they meant as a challenge, and that I read as a confession. It described their first true attempt, a novel agent, built from nothing in the catalog, designed specifically to defeat the human foundry by being unlike any molecule a liver had ever met, so strange in its construction that no standing enzyme could find a handle on it. They had been very proud of it. They had tested it on the only material the annex would permit them, cultured human tissue, grown from the cohort samples kept alive in their vats. And the brief, in its dry Oriphant way, recorded the result. The tissue cleared the agent, not slowly, not with difficulty. The cultured human cells, with no brain, no will, no soldier's resolve, nothing but the standing machinery in the cell itself, had recognized the most alien molecule the Oriphant could invent as exactly what the foundry treats everything as. A stranger, therefore an enemy, therefore something to take apart, and had taken it apart. The Oriphant had spent 2 cycles building a poison so novel that no body could anticipate it, and a dish of human cells had answered it the way Doran Webb answered everything, the way the teacher who drank tea answered everything, by not being impressed. The brief ended with one line, and I have kept it, because it is the only time I have ever seen an Oriphant write a sentence that frightened an Oriphant. It read, "We conclude the defense is not in the human, it is in the cell. There is no individual to outwit. There are only trillions of them, and each one is already certain you are the enemy. We are not fighting a species. We are fighting a decision their bodies made before they had a word for us." And the seven, who had sent us cell cultures and gotten back a verdict on the whole science of clean killing, the 7 did the wisest thing, which was to change the subject. Their liaison, the one who had stood at my shoulder during the sedative dose and spoken of old gods, filed a recommendation with her own government that I have a copy of, because she sent it to me as a courtesy, and it is the sanest sentence any official body produced in the whole affair. She recommended that the 7 cease all chemical contingency planning against the human species permanently and reallocate the effort to the only contingency that has ever applied. Do not give them a reason to come into the room. Her government adopted it. To this day, the 7 have no poison plan for humans because they understood, faster than the rest of us, that a poison plan for humans is a category error, like a flood plan for a fish. The 7 do not plan to poison humans. They plan simply and entirely to never make a human serious. It is the only defense that exists, and they were the first to see it, and they saw it because their liaison stood in my gallery and watched a man yawn through the surgical dose and keep his vote. I keep all 3 reactions in a file beside the corrected column: the mock who looked away, the Orophant who will spend forever failing, the 7 who simply decided never to be in the room with us. 3 responses to the same fact, and the fact is small and clinical and lives in a human's liver, and is, to the human, not even worth mentioning. The largest reorientation of strategic posture the arm has seen in a generation, and at the center of it, the cause of all of it, a settled brewer who genuinely believed he was the least frightening man I would ever meet, and who was right, and whose people are all exactly as frightening as he was, which is to say not at all until you make them mean it. The young toxicologist I keep mentioning, the one the council sends me now, the bright certain one who reminds me of myself, did not believe the corrected column the first time I showed it to him. I did not expect him to. I had not believed it either. With the proof breathing on a table in front of me, belief is not the natural response to a broken certainty. Denial is, and denial is patient, and it took the young one most of a season to come around the same way it had taken me. He went through every stage I had gone through, and watching him do it was like watching myself age in fast motion. First, he said the cohort was too small, 10 humans against 11,000 entries, statistically meaningless. I gave him the field archive. The 41 incidents, the helmet records, the wet coughing in the culvert, the dreamy prisoner telling his interrogators about his garden. He went quiet for a day. Then he said the field cases were confounded, equipment failures, bad batches, exactly as they'd been filed the first time. I gave him the simulation, the 11,000 entries run against the modeled human, the wall of cleared. He said simulations are only as good as their assumptions. I gave him Tessel's mechanism finding, the immunity to the category, the door without a lock. He said, and this was the last and most human thing he said, the thing I had said myself in the night, to the empty gallery, he said, there has to be something. There is always something. Everybody has a number. That is the first thing we are taught. I told him to come with me, and I took him down to the floor, to the table where Doran Webb had asked for lunch, and I had him stand at the foot of it where I had stood, and I told him to imagine the man, soft at the middle, gray in the beard, a working life behind him, the abyss with no antidote in his blood, asking about the meal. And I asked the young one the question the strategist Hennick had asked the chamber, the question that is the only correct response to the human column, the question I should have asked on the first morning instead of reaching for a bigger hammer. Not how do we poison them? That question is finished. The answer is we do not. The question is, what kind of world makes a body like that the baseline? What was coming at them so relentlessly for so long that the unremarkable result, the floor, the least of them, is a body that treats the deadliest thing we ever made as weather. We built 11,000 keys because we met our poisons one at a time and lived to write them down. They built a body that needs no keys because on their world the next poison was always already arriving, and there was never time to write anything down, and so they stopped writing and started simply surviving. And survival became the baseline, and the baseline came standard, and they forgot they were carrying it. The young one stood at the foot of the table a long time. Then he said the thing that told me he had finally understood. The thing it had taken me a season and a man's blood and a council's denial to arrive at, and I let him keep it because it was a better sentence than I had managed. We thought the catalog was a list of how to kill, he said. It's a list of how to avoid them. Every entry is a way we found to not have to be in the room with something, and the one species the whole catalog can't touch is the one we'll have to be in the room with anyway. He looked up from the table. We didn't build a weapon. We built a list of excuses, and they're the thing the excuses don't work on. I told him to go correct the column in his own hand beneath mine, so that when he is the keeper and I am gone, the margin will hold 2 hands agreeing, not one keeper's lonely claim. He did. It is there now. 2 hands under entry 0900, under the old keeper's never witnessed survival. Mine and the young ones. Both saying the same thing in slightly different words. Both saying the thing the brewer said first and best and without thinking it mattered at all. The council did not publish the corrected column. I argued for it and lost. Their reasoning was sound, and the cold way council reasoning is sound. An enemy who knows their poisons work loads poisons. An enemy who learns their poisons are useless loads something else, and the something else is always worse. Better, they decided, that the catalogued worlds keep believing in the drop a while longer than learn, all at once, that the drop is a fantasy and reach for the drum and the blade and the things you reach for when the clean way is gone. So the human column stays, on most decks marked pending, with its old footnote, insufficient data, do not extrapolate. The lie is kinder than the truth, most lies are. That is why we keep them. But I am the keeper, and a keeper does not get to live inside the kind lie. I have a corrected column on my own rail, the real one, the 10 of 10, and I read it more nights than I would like to admit. Here is what reading it has done to me, and it is the last thing I will put on this record, because it is the thing the young toxicologists most need and least want to hear. We built our whole science on the idea that killing is a problem of knowledge. Find the right molecule, the right key, the right drop, and any enemy becomes a chore you can finish without ever raising your hand. The drop let us imagine war as a kind of paperwork, a thing decided in an archive by a quartermaster in advance cleanly at a distance. The drop let us never have to be in the room. The humans took that imagination away from us, not with a fleet, not with a weapon. With a brewer asking for lunch, they handed us a body that simply refuses to be solved at a distance, that treats the unknown itself as an enemy and dismantles it on sight, so that there is no clever drop to discover, no key to cut, no shortcut to buy. Against them, killing goes back to what it was before we were clever. Something you have to come and do, in the room, with your hands while they look at you, meaning it. And they will look at you. They are the people who never got to stop looking. I think about Hennick's question still. What was coming at them day after day for long enough? I think the answer is that everything was, and that they answered it not by getting clever but by getting impossible to poison and then never mentioning it, because to them it was never an achievement. It was weather. It was Tuesday. The most frightening thing about Doran Webb was not that the abyss with no antidote could not touch him. It was that he genuinely did not think it was a big deal, and he was right not to, because every single one of his people is the same, and they all walk around carrying the end of our cleverest science in an organ they never think about, and the only reason we lived this long not knowing is that nobody had ever asked Earth politely for a volunteer. The young one who came to me last cycle, bright, certain, the way I was certain, asked me, when I finished telling him this, whether it wasn't, in the end, a hopeful thing, that a species couldn't be poisoned, that there was a people the clean, cruel shortcut simply didn't work on. I told him to go look at the archive, 11,000 entries, 11,000 keys we cut so we'd never have to mean it. And I told him that the human column being empty is not a hole in the catalog. It is a verdict on the catalog. It is a people standing in the doorway of our whole science, saying plainly, without raising their voice, you have spent your history learning how not to be in the room when you kill. We are the ones you'll have to be in the room with. Bring more than you can carry and bring your hands and look us in the eye while you do it, because we will be looking at you. We always have been. The young one didn't ask any more questions after that. He went and looked at the archive a long time. I keep Doran Webb's panel in the margin of entry 0900, where the old keeper wrote, never witnessed survival, any species, any fraction. Under it, in my own hand, the correction stands, 10 of 10. Mechanism, there is no key. To be rid of them, you must mean it and come. And bring more than you can carry, and be in the room. He asked for lunch. I gave him lunch. It is the only requisition in 61 cycles I ever filled for a weapon, and the only one I would fill again, and I would still, this time, listen to the young fella, because the man on my table was right about that too. He was right about everything. He just didn't think any of it was remarkable. That is the part I cannot file. That is the part that keeps the column open on my rail at night. Not that we cannot poison them, that they cannot imagine why we ever thought we could.